Chalk Talk is brought to you by Isolite, the emergency lighting experts. Stay educated, my friends.
The year was 1953. Swanson changed dinner time forever by inventing the TV dinner, and they did that by mistake. They had 260 tons, that's 260 tons of leftover Thanksgiving turkey, and they didn't know what to do with it. Inspired by airline meal trays, an employee had the idea to package the turkey with sides in a compartmentalized tray. Swanson then sold those for 98 cents, and families across America fell in love with that convenience. And that was the beginning of the TV dinner. Whoa, those however many years ago this week. Happy Tuesday, everybody. Thank you for joining us here on the week of Thanksgiving for a Chalk Talk. Today, we're talking about seismic testing. I'm Evan Ackman. I'm both your master of ceremonies and your host today. We've got Greg and Matt out on assignment. And this may seem like a little bit of a strange topic, but it seemed like a lot of fun to do here on the week of Thanksgiving. We get a little bit of sort of lightheartedness. We've got a fun video in here. I had a nice opportunity to do some DJing to get the playlist just right for the intro. So we're kind of excited about it. It's also timely because we did just go through some seismic testing for our largest inverters. I was talking about that with one of our customers, and a bunch of questions came up, and I said, actually, that would make a really good Chalk Talk to give you guys a little bit of an idea of sort of what we do, where it's required, what is the actual standard that we're trying to comply with, what do we have to do, what's that test look like, and just give you guys a little bit of background on exactly what it means when we say a product is seismic re-rated and how we design products so that even without any sort of special certifications, they actually survive in those atmospheres a little bit better. And so that's what we want to do here today. It's a Chalk Talk. You guys are muted, but please throw your questions in the chat, and I will certainly stick around afterwards to answer anything. Now, I guess first and foremost, there are two different things here. There's agency requirements and sort of internal, our own design requirements. When I say agency, though, I don't mean kind of the traditional cast of characters that we're used to in our industry. It's not UL, it's not NFPA, it's not OSHA, it's none of that. There's actually two organizations that have a little bit to say about seismic testing and what it means to design a building to be sort of tolerant of seismic activities. The first is the Office of Statewide Health Planning and Development. That's a California organization that has standards for how healthcare facilities need to get built. And then the International Code Council publishes the International Building Code, and that also has a little bit to say about how buildings need to be designed to account for earthquakes and other seismic activity. And you'd think that with the OSHPD, it's really just dedicated towards healthcare in California. That's obviously a part of their purview, but in general, they actually get used in a lot of different applications in different areas around the country. Both of these standards really just mandate that the devices that are installed in a facility are capable of maintaining their operational effectiveness through an earthquake so that in our case, the emergency lights can stay on for the full 90 minutes, even if the power outage was caused by, a pretty severe earthquake. It doesn't really say a lot about, oh, you have to be able to live through 20 of these things, or it has to be like, we can replace stuff 3 days later, but they have to remain operational through their lifetime through the actual seismic event. Now, we always like to design our products to sort of, be robust and reliable in many different applications. And so a lot of our products, especially the smaller ones that may fall through exemptions in that OSHPD code or in the IBC code, we still are going to design to tolerate this type of environment. I mean, the most obvious thing is like swivel pendants that can go up to 90 degrees in any direction. That's important for lighter devices. For some of our inverters that actually fall through exemptions in the OSHPD code, we still offer it with seismic restraints. Really, we want to just sort of do better than what's actually required by these codes. that leads to the question, like, where do I have to do it? I mean, as I said before, the Office of Statewide Health Planning and Development would make you think that it's just California healthcare facilities that have obligations for seismic testings, and that's just not the case. Even within California, this code, this organization basically gets used for all at least publicly funded buildings. And at this point, I think it's most privately funded ones as well. And it sort of has migrated throughout the United States. I think it was probably because there were a lot of specifications at one point being written out of California. But now, any place where there's potential seismic activity or someone's really trying to put a belt and suspenders on their building design, that OSHPD code is what ends up getting enforced. And as I said, it's not just California. I actually pulled this map of the most recent earthquakes last week, and then I looked at it again yesterday, and it's even worse. I did the count, and basically 30 states have had earthquakes in the last 30 days. And so that's obviously more than half. Now, of course, not all of them are, of a high enough magnitude to really count. But in my recent memory, we have earthquakes in New Jersey, New York, and Pennsylvania that we felt that were severe enough to cause at least a little bit of consternation for us. So it's not just the middle of California along the fault line where you have to be concerned about earthquakes. A lot of buildings end up having requirements for seismic brackets and a little bit more secure mounting than is offered by standard products. It's hard to say that it's like best practice because there is a cost associated with it, but for buildings that have, sort of resilience requirements, think like data centers, areas of refuge, potentially high rise buildings that shake a little bit nominally, that seismically listed products will really help you in order to do that. Now, OSHPD uh, imposes some requirements, but there's importantly an exemption that exists for products under 50 pounds. So we often think about inverters, and indeed, they're the ones that end up falling into the code requirements most notably. But all of our products end up having this. And so for exit signs, one of the things that's really obvious for us to do is rather than doing what some of our competitors do, which is just allow the transformers or the batteries to sort of float inside of it, basically just sit on a shelf and hang out in there. We don't do that. All of those products or all of those parts inside of the product are always hard fixed to the mounting plate. So you're not going to have, even in an atmosphere where it's potentially shaking, you're not going to have the batteries shaking loose from their connections. You're not going to have, things flopping around inside. All of our pendants are capable of swinging to that full 90 degrees. So if there is an earthquake, you're not going to have that rigid snapping point where a pendant could break or it's going to sit there and flop around with a lot of high energy. It's going to be free to kind of swing in the air, which is what's required for seismic listed products. Now, inverter modifications do exist, though, and this is where we really think about we have to do something special in order to tolerate being in an earthquake environment. And this does require a lot of thought, and really for like three principal reasons, but there's actually more than that. First and foremost, inverters are freaking heavy. Our 33 kVA inverters weigh more than 3 tons once they're loaded up with batteries. And so if 3 tons starts to shake and move, that's obviously going to be a real problem. And so the first thing that we do when we have a seismic inverter is we actually secure it to the ground with additional brackets. So you can see them there on the bottom of that picture. Instead of the traditional, like relatively few mounting points, you end up having about 20 or so bolts into the floor, which hold it rigidly to the deck so that it's not going to like walk its way across the floor and break free of the conduit hitting it. Now, those inverters are heavy because they've got a lot of batteries sitting inside of it. Usually, those batteries do just sit on the shelves because they weigh like 100 pounds each. That's obviously not going to work if the inverter is shaking violently. And so, when we have a seismic inverter, what we'll do is we'll actually ship it with brackets that secure the batteries to those shelves so they can't walk themselves around or potentially jiggle the lugs loose and cause an issue there. And then the last thing that we do on all inverters when they have seismic ratings is we latch the doors with a key. The reason for that, if you've ever taken the front off of one of our inverters, they have like one of those little sort of slotted latches that you could basically stick a dime into or a screwdriver and turn it and it'll open. But that doesn't really secure it enough if the inverter is shaking. Those things can shake themselves loose, and then the doors are going to fall off and expose the high voltage electronics potentially to people who are nearby, which is a no-go. And so the thing that we do is we actually put a keyed lock on the door so that it doesn't have the ability to sort of freely vibrate itself loose. There are other things that we do for certain sizes of inverters. Sometimes we put an additional metal plate in there for additional rack strength. We don't do that on the E3 Max inverters, but some of the smaller E3 Mac inverters do. So there's a lot of modifications that we do to these inverters to make sure that they're going to live through these seismic events. But how do we know that we've actually done it? The OSHPD really has two different ways that you can sort of test and verify that you're going to be approved to go into these buildings in these atmospheres. The first one is bad. It's a pain to do for absolutely everybody, and it's not worth the time that it takes to do it. So the OSHPD basically has this program where for a specific job at a specific location within the facility, a specific configuration of product can be selected. All of that information about the building site, the floor construction, the wall construction, the design, the moment of inertia around the inverter can be provided to a seismic engineer who can review for the use in that particular application. That works. And I know some companies actually do that specifically for very, very large products that you don't want to sort of pre-test. But this is a pain. It's very costly. And if anything changes, if the product configuration changes, if the floor that you're going to install the inverter on would change, if the building is it's one of two and the other one's going to get installed a mile away, none of that certification actually works. What we do is we go through a pre-approval process. So these maps that you saw on the last slide and this side, those are basically earthquake severity maps. They create this effectively like an actuary table that says this is a high risk zone, and they label it 1 through 4. So what we do for our products is we basically say we want to be listed in zone 4 areas, which are the most extreme, under any sort of standard building construction with like a cement pad. And we can then go to a lab and shake the crap out of the inverter and then prove to a seismic engineer that for this severe installation and anything less severe, this is pre-approved. There's no additional work that'll have to be required to specify this into those buildings. And so that's what we do, and that's what we've done with the E3 Max inverter. And I would like to show you what that looks like via a video. Now, we edited this to try to get the volume back down a little bit, but it might be loud. So just word of warning, if you've got your headphones on, maybe just pull them away from your head just a little bit. But this is what it looks like when we test an E3 Max inverter to zone 4, which is the most extreme earthquake zone that you can pre-approve to. So that's what it looks like. It is a very scary test. They don't actually let us in the room while that's occurring, but a couple things to note. I don't know how well it comes across over the Zoom meeting, but they're shaking a lot. I mean, they look like they're almost bending through that, which you think would be impossible given how they're built, but it's a lot of energy that's put into these inverters. The other thing that you'll notice here is that the inverters are actually bolted down to like a cement pad that's sitting on top of the test apparatus. That, just to mirror what we would recommend, is the best practice for mounting. So basically, following that test, as long as you're mounted and bolted into the cement floor, the E3 Max inverters are listed for Zone 4 applications. So that's pretty exciting, which means that they're joining the rest of our products with that free listing. So all of our E3 Max inverters are now listed. All of our E3 Mac inverters have been listed. All of our E3 inverters are listed. All of our wall mount E3 minis are also listed for Seismic Zone 4, even the ones that are exempt because they're less than the 50 pounds I mentioned before. Just a quick note, the T-Bar E3 Mini, do not install that in a place where there might be earthquakes. You're just not going to get that secure enough to give anyone a real warm and fuzzy. So stick to the wall-mounted stuff in those applications. And of course, all of our spec grade exits and emergency lights have mountings that work in seismic environments, as well as that swivel pendant that we mentioned before. In fact, I think most of our exit signs and emergency lights, especially if they offer a pendant, have that characteristic about them. So a pretty wide variety of products for use in high risk zones for earthquakes. Hope you found this informative and maybe a little bit interesting. Everything about the updates to the E3 Max are already up on the web page. So we've updated it. It says Z4. It shows the drawings with the mounting brackets. All that stuff is up there. All the existing products, of course, also have the drawings with the seismic brackets where possible. As always, as a follow-up to this presentation, you're going to get a video of me giving the presentation. You can go back and watch the testing again. We'll send the slides, so if you want to review them when you've got some windshield time before talking to a customer, you could do it there. And then we'll also send along those cut sheets and all of the related assets as a part of the follow-up to this. One other thing we're probably going to do is we're probably going to turn those shake table videos into an actual highlight video. We've got lots of footage of it, and it is, let's just say, visually impressive. So we're probably going to turn that into a highlight video so that you can see it a little bit better on our website soon. I'm Evan. Tom, Greg, and Matt send their regards. We certainly appreciate everything that you guys do for us. So if there's anything that we can do to support you, please don't hesitate to reach out. We're happy to get on the phone and travel out to you guys to see you to talk about anything that your hearts desire. I hope you guys have a great Thanksgiving. I don't think we're going to have a Chalk Talk in December. I think in lieu of that, we're going to do the training day like we did last year, where that's 2 days of 8 hours straight of AIA courses. For those of you who heard it last year, I have no plan to make my voice survive any better than it did last year, but we're going to we'll give it the old college try. Hope you guys have a great holiday. I'll stick around for questions. Otherwise, have a good turkey day.